All right. Hey, welcome to the podcast, or excuse me, the webinar today, everyone. My name is Gary Schoniger. Welcome to Entrepreneurship Beyond Business, an interdisciplinary approach. I'm really excited to kind of lay out some exciting ideas here. My name is Gary Schoniger. I'm the founder and CEO of the Entrepreneurial Learning Initiative. I'm joined with my colleague Raja Bhattacharya, who is the founding director of innovation and entrepreneurship at Northampton Community College in Eastern Pennsylvania. Raja, welcome to the podcast. I keep saying podcast. Welcome to the webinar. We're going to get started. I just want Raja to say hello to everybody. There is a chat function. For those of you who are on the webinar, there's a chat function in your navigation bar. If you will click on that chat function, I got to find it in my own. It disappeared on me here. There's a chat function that, there it is, thank you. If you click on that chat function, so just everyone, you can click on the chat function, just say hello, where you're from, what your name is, where you're from, and so we can all say hello. Well, Raj and I would like this webinar to be interactive. So, you know, throughout the webinar, you can ask questions either in the chat function or in the Q&A. You'll also see that in your navigation, there's a Q&A bar. So if you could all just, you know, chime in and start letting us know who you are and where you're from, that would be really helpful. Look at that already. Okay, Christine, welcome from Michigan. Dawn from Delta College. Oh, I can't keep track of this, coming in too fast. Irina Glass, thank you, Irina, for joining us. Hi, Sandra from Miami. Oh my God, Sandra, it's just like 28 degrees and gloomy here in Cleveland. Puerto Rico, Edgar Soto, hey, welcome. We've done a lot of work in Puerto Rico. William Johnston from North Carolina. William, we're doing some exciting things in North Carolina as well. Madison College is here. Wow, this is fabulous. I'm so happy to see all these folks jumping in here. You know, I'm just going to start with a disclaimer. Like, Raja and I are, you know, both, you know, we've known each other for a few years now. We keep getting together at conferences and talking about the need to develop interdisciplinary entrepreneurship. And this is sort of a new emerging field. So we're as excited to learn from you and to share with you what we've learned. So welcome, everyone. Thanks for chiming in on the chat window. As I said, you can stop at any time. Nick, our colleague, Nick Hool, is standing by to just sort of provide some adult supervision to make sure that if technological problems occur, Nick can take care of that. But also to answer some of the basic questions along the way, Nick can also help with that. So Stephen Taylor is back. Hey, great having you here, Stephen. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to get started, all right? Let's jump right in. So we are the Entrepreneurial Learning Initiative. I'm the founder and CEO of ELI, the Entrepreneurial Learning Initiative. Our focus is on entrepreneurial mindset education programs, as well as keynotes, workshops, facilitator training, and professional development programs for individuals, for organizations, and academic institutions worldwide. Again, our focus is on the entrepreneurial mindset. So in this webinar today, I'm going to talk about three basic things. I'm going to start by redefining entrepreneurship in a way that everyone can embrace. I mean, that's sort of the foundational piece. Then I'm going to talk briefly about start with why and the power of a compelling goal. And lastly, I'm going to touch on, you know, what I would call the pedagogy of entrepreneurial learning, or the andragogy, technically speaking, but 4 learning models that promote entrepreneurial thinking. That should take about 20 minutes or so. Then Raja is going to jump in, talk about embracing best practices of design thinking in the classroom, using powerful in-class activities to engage students, and how to incorporate a curiosity module into your syllabus. Again, we would like this to be interactive so that you guys can chime in, that we can learn from you. You all have experience doing this and can help share some of your experience as well. All right, I'm going to jump in and we're going to redefine entrepreneurship in a way everyone can embrace. So I'm just coming from this basic premise of the world has changed in ways that now require everyone to think like an entrepreneur. And I'm, deliberately italicizing the word think so that people recognize this is not about starting a business. This is about entrepreneurial thinking. We need entrepreneurial thinkers at all levels of society, in public, private, and nonprofit sectors. I want to talk briefly about the benefits of entrepreneurial thinking, not only for the individual, but for the organizations that they work within, as well as the broader communities and societies that they inhabit. So let's start with the individual, right? There's unlimited global demand for people that can think like an entrepreneur. I mean, entrepreneurial thinkers are those who can recognize opportunities. They can bring ideas to life regardless of the circumstances or resources they have to start with, right? Entrepreneurial thinking is a superpower. We also need entrepreneurial thinkers inside established organizations. As you'll see in a moment, these are the skills that employers are demanding. The so-called soft skills are entrepreneurial skills. They're skills of innovators and entrepreneurs. And lastly, it goes without saying, I think that entrepreneurial activity is essential for creating vibrant, equitable, and sustainable communities. We need entrepreneurial thinking to create robust economies. I mean, it's really straightforward. The challenge is that our ability to embrace entrepreneurship is limited by the ways in which we define it. And most of the entrepreneur programs we see on colleges, whether they're community colleges, four-year universities, tend to emulate this sort of Silicon Valley, the venture-backed, high-growth model of entrepreneurship. That's fine, but that's a very, very narrow definition of entrepreneurship. For most people, that's just out of reach, or it's just completely irrelevant. I mean, the venture-backed, high-growth startup, they're very popular. They make a lot of headlines. They're statistical anomalies. A lot of other people just tend to frame entrepreneurship as a business discipline, whether it's a Main Street small business or whatever. But here again, the problems arise when we tend to conflate entrepreneurial attitudes, behaviors, and skills with managerial attitudes, behaviors, and skills. Raja and I were just talking just before we got started about some of the shortcomings in the business school. They're really more designed to promote managerial skills, how to help people manage existing organizations rather than how to discover new opportunities. And that's one of the big aha moments that's come from our research, is this distinction from the attitudes, behaviors, and skills required to discover an opportunity are distinct from the attitudes, behaviors, and skills required to exploit an opportunity. And I want to, if I could say this a little bit differently, I would say that not everyone wants to start a business, but we all want to discover opportunities. And that's really how we're going to define entrepreneurship. And I'm going to kind of begin with this often cited definition from the legendary Howard Stevenson at Harvard Business School, who defined entrepreneurship as the pursuit of opportunity beyond resources control. I kind of like this definition. It still seems a little abstract. I want to simplify it and say that entrepreneurship is opportunity discovery. And We could argue, we could parse about the nuances here, but really, if we define entrepreneurship as a discovery process, we now include everyone in the conversation. It's no longer a business discipline. It's something we're all inherently interested in. And furthermore, I've interviewed hundreds of entrepreneurs around the world over the last 10 years. I wish I would have been smart enough to track this, but I would say, somewhere around 40 to 50% of the people I've interviewed said they never even really identified as an entrepreneur. They had no interest in starting a business when they began. So let's just go with this premise of entrepreneurship as an opportunity discovery process, right? So opportunity discovery requires opportunity discovery skills like empathy, observation and inquiry, experimentation and adaptation, creativity and critical thinking, effective communication, teamwork, collaboration, effective problem solving, resourcefulness and resilience, self-directed learning, self-regulation, right? These are some basic attitudes and skills that are required to discover opportunity. As you can see, these are well aligned with 21st century learning skills. As you can also see, they're skills that anyone can learn to develop. They are skills that, for the most part, our systems of education have historically undervalued, overlooked, or ignored. Now, it's probably also more important to talk about what opportunity discovery does not require. And this is really to the point that entrepreneurship, we don't even really, I don't think of entrepreneurship as a business discipline. I think of it as a behavioral phenomenon. I mean, we all recognize the need for entrepreneurial thinkers. I mean, these are the people that are improving existing products and services. They're inventing new, they're creating jobs, they're solving societal problems, they're improving the quality of our life. We need more people to be innovative and entrepreneurial at all levels of society. My point here is it's probably more important to point out what opportunity discovery does not require. So it doesn't require big ideas. You don't need like venture capital worthy ideas. You don't need access to investors. You don't need to be a genius. You don't need a unique, charismatic, creative personality. You don't need to have a life sciences degree or engineering degree from Stanford. You don't need to quit your job. You don't need to drop out of school. And more importantly, you don't even need an interest in starting a business at all. I'm fond of saying, while not everyone wants to start a business, who among us is not interested in being engaged in work that matters, to contributing to our work and having a voice in our work and seeing our work impact others, as well as the ability to see our work lead towards a more meaningful and prosperous life. So entrepreneurial behavior stems from entrepreneurial beliefs, and thus the term entrepreneurial mindset, which I define as the underlying beliefs and tacit assumptions that drive our behavior. I've emphasized the word underlying because much of our mindset, the majority of our mindset, is functioning beneath our conscious awareness. This is our deeply held, mostly unconscious, taken for granted beliefs and assumptions that drive our behavior. So, having interviewed all of these hundreds of entrepreneurs, and what we're looking for is commonality and replicability. What is common in their beliefs, in their language, in their behavior, and their circumstances. What drives the behavior? And what I've distilled from this research is this sort of core assumption, and this is mostly a tacit assumption. It's like deeply held, and the entrepreneur is unable to articulate it. But it's some version of this idea that I need to figure out how to make myself useful to other people. And by doing that, I can empower myself. And I sort of think of this as sort of enlightened self-interest, right? The more people I can be useful for, the better off I'm going to be in myriad ways. So I think of this as the core assumption of the entrepreneur. How can I make myself responsible, or excuse me, how can I make myself useful to others? So far we've talked about entrepreneurship as a discovery process, an opportunity discovery process, requires opportunity discovery skills. It starts with this core assumption that I need to figure out how to use my strengths, my interests, and my abilities to make myself useful to the people around me in my immediate, in my domain. Whether you're working at a Subway for a minimum wage, job, or you want to change the world, that's sort of the core assumption. I want to switch gears now and talk about some of our research in the power of a compelling goal, and I want to talk about that just briefly. So a lot of you are familiar with the work of Peter Senge and the fifth discipline. Some of you are, I'm sure, familiar with the work of Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi in Flow, which is really helpful to understanding the entrepreneurial behavior and where we're trying to get our students. So let's start with a current reality, and let's start to think about a compelling goal. And there's two things here I want to talk about. One of the things that, Csikszentmihalyi talks about is that when the challenge exceeds our capability, we kind of tend to come into anxiety, right? We get anxious when the challenge exceeds our skill or our capabilities. When our capabilities exceed the challenge, we become bored. So in the middle, there's this zone of optimal challenge, and that's really, that's flow. That's the highest level of human engagement, which Csikszentmihalyi describes as flow. So the idea here is really simple. It's the power of the compelling goal that elicits the engagement. And I'm finding more and more research to demonstrate that this level of engagement, we tend to look at people and think that the engagement is coming from the individual, and we fail to recognize that the engagement has a lot to do with the nature of the goal being pursued. And I could spend an entire webinar on this, but what I'm seeing is that if you want to understand why innovative and entrepreneurial people are so engaged, stop looking at the individual and start looking at the nature of the goal they're pursuing, right? So I'm seeing more and more evidence that the awareness of a compelling goal elicits psychological and physiological responses, not unlike the awareness of a threat. They're different physiological and psychological responses, but it creates a similar reaction. So if the goal is compelling, we'll tolerate the anxiety. So we're pursuing the compelling goal. We're constantly being challenged above our capabilities. But because the goal is compelling, we adapt and we learn and we move closer to our goal, right? When we become bored, we seek a greater challenge. What Senge is saying is that if we're not willing to tolerate what he calls creative tension, we'll just reduce the goal. If we are willing to tolerate that tension, that creative tension, we'll start moving towards our goal. The basic idea here is that you've got to start with why. Like, what is the compelling goal? Once an individual is set upon a compelling goal, learning, teaching becomes much easier. All right, so lastly, I want to talk about what I'll call the mechanisms of human agency. What we see in experienced entrepreneurs as a result of pursuing a compelling goal is a high degree of self-efficacy, an internal locus of control, a deeply held belief that I'm responsible for my own outcomes. They tend to be intrinsically motivated, meaning, Mark, I'll answer your question in 1 second. They tend to be intrinsically motivated, meaning the task itself is the reward. And we see this, there's a lot of research that demonstrates companies or individuals who are motivated by purpose over profit, they outperform individuals or companies that are purely profit-driven. I mean, intrinsic motivation versus extrinsic motivation, the literature is quite clear on that. So Mark is saying, curious if the Senge graph is ever intended to reach a goal. It's a good question, Mark. I don't know the answer. It's the rubber band thing in Senge's work that I'm trying to illustrate here, that there's a sort of an analysis of the current reality, there's a compelling goal, and it necessitates the tolerance of what he calls creative tension. So if we're willing to tolerate it, we're likely to move towards that goal. If we're not willing to tolerate the tension, we'll just lower the goal. And that's the Senge part of my illustration. So, okay, back to this mechanisms of human agency. We also tend to see a high degree of resiliency, which is the ability to optimistically interpret adversity, right? As entrepreneurs, we keep getting ourselves into jackpots in the pursuit of our compelling goals. We keep, and we keep getting out of the jackpots. We keep finding a way, and as a result, we develop resiliency. We also tend to develop a growth mindset, which is a tendency to believe, a deeply held belief, that I can learn anything I set my mind to through deliberate practice. Again, this happens because the goal is compelling. In the entrepreneur's case, we don't always have resources, so you've got to teach yourself things, because unlike in a corporate setting, you don't go down the hall to legal or corporate or IT or whatever to solve problems. We're left to figure them out ourselves. All right, lastly, I want to talk about an interdisciplinary of the learning models, 4 learning models that promote entrepreneurial learning. I love this quote from the president of Olin College, Richard, can't see his name there again, Richard Miller, thank you. He describes it as expeditionary learning, where we create our own knowledge and invent our own career. So, excuse me. I want to talk briefly about 4 learning models. The first is experiential, project-based, and peer-to-peer, and self-directed. If we observe innovators and entrepreneurs in the wild, this is what they're doing. This is sort of what I would call the pedagogy of the entrepreneur. So let's start with experiential learning. For those of you who are familiar with the work of David Kolb in experiential learning, it starts with a feeling or an experience. In the entrepreneur's case, it's a frustration, it's a curious moment. I wonder why we do it that way, right? Then there's some observation, some reflection. Once we understand what's going on, then we start to conceptualize a solution. We design experiments, and we get feedback from the experiments. This is perhaps the best illustration I've found that describes what entrepreneurs do intuitively. I'm going to switch gears, to project-based learning, which is also what entrepreneurs do, which is project-based learning is student-centered, meaning the students decide the projects they want to work on. It occurs in small groups. The teacher is a facilitator, not subject matter expert. The problems are introduced early in the learning process. The problems stimulate problem solving, and new knowledge is acquired. Sandra, yes, I'm sorry, I should have said that at the beginning. We will give, immediately following this webinar, we'll send out to all registrants both my presentation as well as Raja's immediately following. So thank you. I'm sorry I didn't say that earlier, Sandra. All right. Here's the key to effective project-based learning and effective entrepreneurial development is the solving of ill-structured problems. These are problems that don't have one single right answer. They're open-ended and complex. They mirror the real world. They require collaboration. It evolves with new information. It sparks interest and controversy and engages questions. The third thing I want to talk about here is peer-to-peer learning. Highly recommend Eric Mazur's work at Harvard in peer-to-peer learning. I took this quote from a paper he wrote in 2008. Peer-to-peer learning increases retention, right? Turns passive note-taking students into active de facto teachers who explain their ideas to each other. That's what entrepreneurs are constantly doing. They're talking to other entrepreneurs. They're showing their ideas to other people. They're learning from the feedback. That's why they're so engaged. The research on peer-to-peer learning as far as student attrition is quite astonishing. Both at two-year colleges, at an Ivy League school, peer-to-peer instruction is proven to reduce student attrition significantly. All right, lastly, I want to talk about self-directed learning and the work of Gerald Grow. And I think of him as an unsung hero in education. But how do we move students from a dependent to an interested, involved, and self-directed learner? There are three phases. I don't have the time to get into this in depth, but it's really, really interesting stuff to me anyways. Starting with a dependent student, the teacher is the expert. Interested student, the teacher becomes a motivator. An involved student, the teacher becomes a facilitator. And ultimately, as the projects take life, the teacher becomes a delegator as the students become entirely self-directed. So that's the end of my rapid fire presentation. I just want to close with this great quote from Jaime Casap at Google Education, in which he said, let's stop asking students what they want to be and let's start asking them what problems they want to solve and what they need to learn in order to solve those problems. So I'm going to pause there and ask what questions do you have, and we're going to turn this over to Raja in just a minute or so. Want to just take a pause and see if there are any questions that you might have. Any questions? All right. Well, we don't have questions now. We'll still have time at the end of the presentation as well. So hold on a second, William Johnson. Where does purpose fit into entrepreneurship? William, I'll give you the $20 later for asking that question. You know, it's really in the power of the compelling goal. You're asking a really good question. The purpose, like what makes a goal compelling? You know, we're getting into like motivation theory, and I could roll up my sleeves and geek out with you here, William. But I think what we know from the literature is that a goal is compelling. That and this is kind of goes back to Aristotle. That you know, there's the pleasurable life where we seek pleasure. There's a good life when we figure out how to use our strengths to enrich ourselves. But the meaningful life comes when we figure out how to use our strengths and our abilities to apply it to something greater than ourselves. And that's the million-dollar question, William. It's really a compelling goal is something where our strengths are applied to something bigger than ourselves. I could also go on about this, William, and I won't, but about intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. Money, as it turns out, is a fairly weak motivational force. Like we know that separable rewards are less meaningful, less motivational than intrinsic rewards, where the task itself is the reward. Check out Q&A too. Okay, thank you, Nick. Let me get to the Q&A. Can you tell us about entrepreneurial management, Eslam? I can. You know, in my view, Islam, I think that's like an oxymoron in a lot of ways, right? Like entrepreneurial management, you know, I think entrepreneurs need to manage themselves, but I kind of think of there's this transitionary period. Once there is evidence of a useful thing, now we have to become managerial. And I see more separation there than I do complementary skills. And I think we get a lot of trouble when we conflate those things. But let me back up for a second, Islam. I love your question. I think of these two modes of thinking, right? One of them is exploratory thinking, and the second mode of thinking is exploitative. And I think, you know, I'm gonna sort of contradict myself now, which I have the right to do. At least Raja told me that I do. But you know, we need to find a balance between exploratory thinking and exploitative thinking, and I think maybe the answers are there. I want to go back to some other questions here. Entrepreneurs must, Warren is saying, entrepreneurs must be brave during their discovery. That is such an understatement, Warren. It's really, and I'm really interested in like the underlying factors and the circumstances that will tend to stop us from this discovery, right? Because we're hardwired from an evolutionary psychological perspective to conform to the group. And by being innovative and entrepreneurial, you're essentially betting against the group. So there's lots of these subtle things that wreak havoc on our psyche, like ambiguity tolerance and conformity and other things that require us to be very, very brave. William is saying, what if we help students and others look at entrepreneurship as a way to serve something bigger? I love that, William. That's exactly what we should be doing. It's not, you know, starting a business is one way to manifest an entrepreneurial mindset. But the purpose of a business is to distribute useful things to the world. The purpose of entrepreneurship is to discover useful things. And yes, there's some overlap. We could parse on that, but I love where you're going with that, William. And I think that's what we've seen with the Ice House Entrepreneurship Program. Students have no interest in business at all, become very engaged. So Grace is asking, what if we don't have an idea or product? Can I still be an entrepreneur? Yes, awesome question, Grace. We can, like the innovator entrepreneur, it's a muscle. that has to be developed. And what I've encouraged people to do in our trainings and workshops is to start developing that muscle. Start looking for the smallest little problems that you can solve. Most entrepreneurs, like, good ideas are the result of lots of bad ideas. So it's a fabulous question, Grace. Thank you. Hengu, I hope I'm pronouncing your name properly. My apologies if I'm not. What do you suggest that we should do in practice as an educator from entrepreneurial mindset to students in class? I do activities, but sometimes I don't know what exactly I need to do or what I need to do it. I think Raja is going to answer some of these questions, Hengu. I hope that this presentation, at least starting from a premise of it's about opportunity discovery. It's about searching for ways that you can make yourself more useful with the knowledge that you're gaining. Okay, Rob Newman is asking, is bravery or curiosity more important? Depends on the stage. I think, Rob, you answered your own question there. It's a good question. So, wow, this is great to have these questions. Great to have you guys engaged. I see we have a lot of really engaged educators, and I'm hoping that you all can help us. You know, we can all help each other. No one's got it all figured out. So I'm going to stop with the questions in the Q&A for a moment and turn over to my dear friend Raja, who's going to take over the screen right now, and I'm going to turn my camera off.
Okay. Can you all see me? Okay. So let me get back to my slides here. Well, first of all, good afternoon, or in some of your cases, probably evening will be coming here pretty soon. My name is Raja Bhattacharya. I am with Northampton Community College, and Gary invited me to participate on this webinar today to talk about entrepreneurial mindset, and also to talk about what we are doing here at Northampton regarding integrating entrepreneurship into our curriculum. So I was looking at some questions that some of you are asking, and I'm hoping that I'll be able to answer some of those questions, especially if you are working for a 2-year or a 4-year college, because I think that's going to be the most of my discussion this afternoon with you. Let me just tell you a little bit more about myself. I've been in the field of academics for almost 10 years, primarily teaching and developing entrepreneurial curriculum and also program. But the other half of my career has been working with startups and also creating 2 startups. So you can say that I have sat on both sides of the table, and I've also learned a lot from that process. And one of the things that I have always found interesting is that how do you deliver entrepreneurial education to students, primarily college students, and also I'm also doing some work with high school students these days. And I can tell you that probably the whole notion of experiential learning is very important when you are designing entrepreneurial curriculum. But I think there's a lot of things that we can do as faculty and as educators that can also help our students learn a little bit differently, or let me see what happened. There we go. A little bit differently, or be more productive in a classroom setting. So the first thing that I'd like to talk about is the syllabus dilemma, right? So all of us are required to create syllabus when we teach a class. This is part of what we do. But if you really look at a lot of syllabus that 2-year and 4-year institutions come up with, A lot of the syllabus has a lot of similarity. And the question that I always ask myself, and the question that we are asking here at Northampton Community College, is that how do we make our syllabus more interesting, as well as dynamic, so that students would find it more valuable and would find it more interesting in their learning process. And I also, believe me, I also understand the concept of taking new programs and new curriculum through curriculum committee, and here at Northampton we also face the same problem, right? So we are a bureaucratic organization as well. But one of the things that we are doing here, and what I'm going to share with you this afternoon, is that without having to make a lot of changes and without having to go through the curriculum committee multiple times, what are some things that we can do as faculty to integrate the whole notion of entrepreneurship into our classroom? There was a question that I was looking earlier, I think someone asked a question as far as, do I have to have a business idea to be an entrepreneur? And my answer to you is absolutely not. You don't. I think anyone can learn to become an entrepreneur. It's more of a mindset, and any of our students can also learn to become an entrepreneur. And I was talking to Gary earlier. He and I have been having this discussion. One of the things that I firmly believe, and by the way, I was trained by business schools. I worked in business schools, and I've also developed two businesses. And I'll tell you that business schools technically are not designed to host entrepreneurship program, because business schools curriculum are more geared towards producing managers instead of owners, which is two totally different concepts. So I think that entrepreneurial education and what we do in classrooms, regardless of discipline, can really make a difference on and how our students see things, and that's what we are doing here at Northampton Community College. So my screen is stuck here. There we go. So one of the things that I look at is, think about Google, right? All of us use it. Probably the most widely used search engine in the world. The last time I looked at it, Google had about 80%, or probably more than that, the market share in the search engine world. And believe me, Google has been instrumental for a lot of good things. But we also, but one of the things that we also look at is, in some cases, has Google also precluded us from doing something, right? So one of the notion that I think about, and one of the things that I find in my students, is that Google has made some of my students a little bit less curious. There's a question here from Stephen that says, how do you assess or measure curiosity and self-reflection as part of a broader program assessment? Let me answer that question to you here in a minute, Stephen. I think that as I'm going through my presentation, you probably will see some of the things that I'm going to be discussing here, and I'll come back to your question as soon as I'm done with my presentation. So one of the things that I'm looking at is, is Google serving the right purpose with our students? And my answer to the question is that, think about when Google was designed, by two freshmen or sophomore out of Stanford, right? So one of the founder of Google literally said that when he was asked this question as far as what type of search engine, he was thinking about designing, and answer was like a perfect search engine, one that would understand exactly what we mean and give us back exactly what we want. And if you really look at how Google is designed these days and what it produces, they probably are pretty close to that goal. But the question that I have is that, what if we don't know what we want? And I think this is where the question of why and how comes in. And I think this is where also the whole notion of where the notion of curiosity also comes in. And one of the thing that I also want to relay to you is that we are having our students here at Northampton look at this very closely, and we are also saying that what can we do things differently in classroom setting so that the students can better ask the question of why and how, because that requires for them to increase their understanding and their knowledge. So the next thing that I want to talk to you about is how are we training our students, especially in a classroom setting, right? Most of our curriculum, most of what we do, is more geared towards, students favoring puzzles over mysteries. The notion of, we all of us like, certainty. We like that with our students as well. Probably our students love that as well. But what are mysteries? That's where, you really gain the knowledge and also, and attain knowledge that is more sustainable. But mysteries are more ambiguous, right? So you cannot, find the answers right away. You have to really work on that. So there's a good book by Ian Leslie called Curiosity. You may want to get a copy of that. And I recommended that book to Gary as well. And he and I have been talking about, that book as well. Leslie has some a really interesting insights as far as what he thinks about the difference, between puzzles and mysteries. And he also talks about, what mysteries can really do to an individual, what kind of advancement it can really bring in, and he has given some really good examples. So that is something, that we certainly are looking at here at Northampton, Community College. So as it relates to that, so I want to talk to you about what exactly are we doing here at Northampton to look into this aspect of making our students more curious. And not only that, but how do we make them learn in a different way, right? Put them in a different setting. So we are looking at two concepts here. One is the notion of design thinking. I'm pretty sure that a lot of you are familiar with this, with this notion. Stanford University has done a lot of work in design thinking. This is something that we are looking at it very closely. We are also implementing design thinking in a lot of our curriculum here at Northampton Community College. And if you look at design thinking, the 5 key ingredients of design thinking is empathy, defining the problem, ideating, prototyping, testing. And I added the 6th one there, implement, because I think that design thinking can be a 5+1 concept, whereas an implementation is also key once you come up with an idea. But one of the things that we are doing is also looking at the individual component of design thinking, such as empathy, defining the problem, and ideating. And I'll give you an example. So there's a group of students that we are working at here, and they're coming from the education department. They have got an advocacy project that they have to complete within this semester. So we are looking at the three aspects of design thinking, or the first 3 modules: empathy, problem statement or defining the problem, and then ideating. Then what are some possible solutions that you can come up with? And what we did was we are having them go through 4 or 5 sessions for them to truly understand, who are the customers that they are really going after, and then what are the customers really thinking about, and based on that, how much time does it really take? What kind of patience do they really need to have to come up with an accurate problem statement that they're able to look at and find some solutions, right? So I can see the change in the students, right? How we saw them from the very beginning, and throughout the weeks. And this is not a full semester thing. So they are with me and they're with their faculty for about 3 or 4 sessions. And so we are giving them a little bit of this, within an entire semester or within a 16-week format. So so this is something that you may want to think about, that, you don't have to have an entire, component on design thinking in your syllabus or in your classes. You can literally look at each aspect of design thinking and see, if some of those things really applies to what you are doing. And I dare to say that no matter what subject matter that you are teaching, design thinking can relate to a lot of things, that we are doing. And it really brings that, the problem solving and the experiential side, to the classroom. Because at the end of the day, how I look at, design thinking is for students to build their knowledge database, right? So what we want our students to become more knowledgeable as they go through the semester and as they go through the different subjects that they're studying. And that's all design thinking is about, especially in a classroom setting, that they're building and expanding, their database. They are basically adding that, toolkits to their learning process. The next thing that before I move into curiosity here, if you look at some of the key components of design thinking, especially on the empathy stage, and also when it comes to defining a problem, the two key aspects of design thinking is listening and observing. And if you really look at your students and what you are teaching them, I would say that this probably relates to a lot of us. It certainly relates to me here. When I'm teaching my students, this whole aspect of building listening skills and what are the customers thinking, or what are the people that the problem that they have identified will impact, and what are they thinking about it. And observing really relates to, it comes from listening, right? So, and observing also relates to curiosity, which we'll get to here in a minute. So these are some of the values that I found, that I have found out in working with my students, and also working with our other faculty members in what they are doing, with their classes. The next thing is curiosity. So this is another component that we are looking at here closely about integrating, and then we have integrated in some level to different subject matters. And if you look at it, the power of curiosity really depends on three things: that's surprise, knowledge, and also building confidence. I think those are the three key ingredients of curiosity. So, and if you really think about this, we are really addressing the power of curiosity in some of our English 1 and English 2 classes, here at Northampton. One of the examples that I can give you, and I've got that in my final slide as well. One of the challenges, or one of the questions that I have asked faculty here, and by the way, I don't teach English, but with faculty that do teach English here at Northampton, one of the questions that I have asked them is that, all of you require to have your students write a final paper in English 2, and it's a substantial, and that accounts for a substantial portion of their grade. And my question to them has been, how do your students find out the topic that they want to write about, right? A lot of the students struggle with that, about finding good, relevant topic. And if you really do not infuse or start your students in the process of being curious about something, right, then how would they come up with really interesting, topic? And as Gary was presenting, and one of the things that struck me was when he said that the power of questions is why and how, and the compelling goals, right? Those are related, and that is directly related to the aspect of someone, being curious. Because if you think about it, one of the things that, Leslie focuses on in his book, Curiosity, is the aspect of knowledge. The more knowledge that we get, the more curious that we become, right? So the whole and the explanation here is that as you become more knowledgeable about something, can you become less curious about that particular thing? Yes, you can do that. But what also tends to happen is that once you start becoming more knowledgeable about a particular thing, then your horizon also expands. Then you also start looking at other things that you may be interested in. And that's where we really, want our, students to, that we want our students to get to. At the end of the day, I think not only our students, we also want to have our, students recognize their own ignorance, right? And so because at the end of the day, that's going to help them. And I think our job as faculty members is to help them, move through that process. So there are a couple of things that I am doing, or we are doing it at Northampton here let me get to my last slide, then I'll come back to this slide here. So some of the things that we are doing at Northampton, especially in regards to the classes and how we are implementing the design thinking and curiosity within our class structures, are some tools that we are using is the power of questions. We are having students create, semester-long or keep a semester-long curiosity journal. 2 weeks in-class design thinking modules, an advocacy-based project in design thinking, and also a short 2 minutes reflection video. And let me give you, how we are integrating this. First of all, the approach that we have taken is that you don't need a full semester class in design thinking, curiosity, or even in that context and entrepreneurship for a student to start becoming more entrepreneurial or start building that mindset. Our approach here has been that each and every faculty member can probably take 1 or 2 weeks out of their semester, in their syllabus, and integrate some of these components that will make their class more interesting. And that's where the design thinking comes in place. So we are having our faculty members take a look at the 6 components of design thinking and see if either 1 or 2 of those components really fits into what they are doing. The advocacy project that I gave you an example is one program that we have implemented design thinking in. We are also looking at some of our architectural classes. So we have got an interior design and architecture program here at Northampton Community College. And so one of the things that we did with their faculty was train them to use design thinking within their coursework for about a week or 2, so that the students can learn about design thinking and how it really applies to some of their project. Because a lot of the interior design and architectural project or their assignments are project-based, and they are looking at a particular problem, and they are trying to find solutions, and that's what design thinking is really about. Another class that we are right now looking at implementing design thinking is also in theater. So we've got a theater program here. So one of the things that and that theater and the students are a part of producing a summer theater, for the school. So we are incorporating design thinking in that process of how they come up with solutions, for summer programs. As far as curiosity goes, we are working heavily on some of our English classes regarding that, especially in our writing classes, where students have to come up with topics. I'm also implementing that module in a class that I teach. I teach a class in entrepreneurship, both here at the college, and I also do it in high school. So one of the things that I'm making my students do is I'm having them keep a journal. And one of the things that I require them to do is that I require them to take about 5 minutes out of their day. And I said that, I don't want you to take your phone or your computers or your iPad, and I want you to find an interesting place and just sit down, get a notebook, and start writing what you see and what you feel. And I require them to do 5 minutes every day. And at the end of the week, we have a class discussion, on what they saw, what they found. And you'd be amazed to see some of the answers that they come up with. And say at the end of the semester, based on the journal that they have kept, I asked them to, produce a 2 minutes reflection video. That is a substantial part of their grade, and that talks about what they really have learned, what they saw, and how it has really made them think a little bit differently, right? Producing videos for students these days is very, very easy. All of them pretty much have a smartphone or some kind of a smart device, and they can implement that, pretty quickly. So these are the things that we are doing here, at Northampton, because one of our goals here at Northampton is integrating entrepreneurship and innovation and everything that we do. And especially from a classroom perspective, our focus right now has been on providing and training our current instructors on how they can integrate entrepreneurship and innovation into what they are doing, without having to go through a full semester course or a full semester module in their classes. And we are beginning to see some results, because I do get feedback from faculty and saying that this is what the students thought about this class. These are some changes that they're saying. And another thing is that it also brings some amount of freshness, to their class. So I'm going to leave you with this slide here, which is actually my next to the last slide. Think about these 3 concepts, right? That we don't need teachers to teach us fact, skill, creativity. and we should focus on thinking skill instead of knowledge. And I would dare to tell you that those three misconceptions are so, it's so untrue in a sense that, students have to have teachers to teach them. We all learn from someone else in our life. That's what we have done. Facts are really important if we want to really enhance creativity. It probably is, it sits at the center of any creative activity. And then the whole concept of focusing on thinking skill instead of knowledge, right? The more knowledgeable you become about something, probably you will develop thinking skill as you move forward. So, so getting that knowledge is also very, very important. So those are the aspects that we are, looking at here at Northampton Community College. And like I said, we are beginning to see some results. As Gary pointed out, entrepreneurial mindset is central to what we do. Matter of fact, when I came here to design the program here for NCC, one of the discussions we had was whether the Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship should reside inside an academic unit or should it be a standalone unit. And the decisions that the administration made, which I was really glad, the way they went, is that we decided that the Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship at NCC would be outside an academic environment. So it will not be hosted in any one particular academic discipline. And the reason behind that is that we did not want it to be constrained, by any thoughts or by any academic discipline as far as the direction that we wanted to move in. And our approach has been that we can play a role in no matter what any faculty or any students are studying here at NCC, whether they're going after business or technology or human studies, or even a one-year degree in culinary or any kind of a fabrication degree. So we offer multiple programs here. We think that entrepreneurship has a role to play in each and every one of the degrees. And I'm going to leave you with this, to answer the question that came earlier was, do I need to have a product or idea to become an entrepreneur? And I said that absolutely not. If you look at it, data shows that even if you have an entrepreneurship program, right? Even if you have an entrepreneurship major in your college, the chances for a student that is coming out of that program to start something on his or her own is less than 1%. That person will still go and work for somebody else. And as faculty, that's what I want. I want them to go and work for somebody else because they are highly productive now, probably great thinkers, they can do good stuff. Now, 5 or 10 years from now, when that student graduates, if you have basically incorporated that mindset, given them the tool of what design thinking looks like, which is a problem-solving technique, you'll really have piqued their curiosity about a particular subject matter. 5 to 10 years down the line, that person will think really seriously about starting something on his or her own. And that's what we want. And that's what you want, your students to do, as well. So I think it is all connected together. And a program that really, promotes an entrepreneurial mindset across discipline, you'll see results. But I see that the faculty, from my perspective, since I am, with the community college here, are the front line. These are the individuals that the students see on a daily basis. And I think one of the things that the faculties also have to change their mindset as far as what they're delivering in their classroom and ask that big why, right? Why am I doing this? What are my students really getting out of it? That's something that is really important, for faculty to ask. And we are making our faculty, look into this. This is not an easy process. We also have our eyes open, as a community college. Would I like 100% of my faculty to adopt what we are doing? Yes, but are we there yet? No. And it's a slow process. Right now, our goal is to, get 10, 20, 30 faculty members start working with us and integrating, the notion of design thinking and curiosity, into their curriculum. And as you build that, then you will see the momentum, and I think the growth will come. That's the expectation, that we have. Anyway, so that's my presentation, and I'll be happy to answer take any questions that you may have. So let me answer. So Stephen Taylor, and actually this question is to all panelists, and that is, how do you assess or measure curiosity and self-reflection as part of a broader program assessment? So that's a great question, and I don't have a clear answer for you, on that. I think you probably can look at different metrics to see how you assess that. So one of the things that we are looking at here, especially from a student perspective, and I'll just give you an example of the English class, that we are working with in integrating Imagine and Curiosity. So one of our goals is that the ability for the students to come up with great topics and write well. That itself, I think, is an assessment measure to see, are we seeing improvement on that or not. Another thing that we are looking at, especially in my entrepreneurship class, where I have incorporated that curiosity module, is that where were the students at the beginning of the class and where they are at the end of the class, right? What are some things that they were able to particularly point out within themselves, and were they able to identify that throughout the semester and discuss that with me and their classmates. So coming up with things like that, this is not an easy answer, but I think things like that certainly can help towards measuring how do we assess curiosity. Next question from William Johnson. What are your thoughts about teaching students how to create a side hustle based on how they want to serve something bigger than themselves, or something based on their talents and gifts? Great question, William, and I would highly recommend that. If you have a course, if you're teaching a course, or if you're responsible about a program, and if you can integrate about having students start something on their own as a part of their learning process, I mean, that's a no-brainer, I think. So one of the things that we are doing here, just to give you an example of that teaching method. So we have got a Fab Lab here at Northampton. So Fab Lab is, for those of you that don't know what it is, it's a giant makerspace. It's the way I would define it. You can do a lot more than a traditional makerspace in a Fab Lab. So one of the things that we are doing with our Fab Lab is we are starting. My colleague, Jeff Boner, who is in charge of the Fab Lab, he's starting a business there for students that students can manage and run while they are taking classes here. So we brought a big banner printer that the Fab Lab installed, so that the students can start a banner business, right? And the market right now is the college. The college, buys a lot of banners for a lot of different things. So one of the things that we are having the students do is to not only operate that business while they are they're at Northampton, but also learn about how to make money, how to price things, how to market the banner, those kind of activities. If you can integrate that while you are, running a program or teaching, that's a no-brainer. I definitely would recommend that. And there's other examples that I can also, give you.
Raja, I want to jump in on William's question. It's a really good question. The only piece I would add to what you've already said, Raja, to your question, William, is I wouldn't necessarily insist that it be something based on their unique talents or gifts. I would say like even figuring that out is a really iterative process. And I would say, an entrepreneurial mindset is really an agentic mindset. It's about our ability to affect change in the world. And I think any experience that we can experience, our students, I said earlier in my presentation that sort of this core assumption is the idea, this deeply held assumption that it's up to me to figure out how to make myself useful to other humans. That's really different from the core assumption of what I'll call an employee mindset, which is that I need to get, I need to make myself useful to an employer who's going to tell me what is useful. I mean, that's why we've historically ignored the discovery skills have been ignored, because we're operating on a deeply held assumption that our students are going to work in an established organization in a highly stable environment, is controlled or directed by others, and they're going to fulfill a predetermined, well-defined role. We're still operating on those assumptions, even though that is not the case. It's rarely the case. I mean, our assumptions are that we're going to have to work in stable environments, other directed. The reality is our students are going to have to work in highly unstable, self-directed environments. They're going to have to figure out how to make themselves useful knowledge when no one there is there to tell them what is useful. And Raj and I have talked about this. I mean, there's a degree of learned helplessness here that we're talking about. I mean, barely minimum wage at Starbucks. I mean, there's people with a lot of knowledge, a lot of credentials and knowledge. They don't have any idea how to make themselves useful with that knowledge in the world in the absence of someone to tell them what to do. So I'm just sorry, I wanted to chime in there. Stephen is saying a colleague of mine came to college, $20, he's beginning to stand right ahead to start. Okay, so to your point, Stephen, everyone can see this in the chat box. We work with a college system in Mexico called Tecnológico de Monterrey. They have 120,000 students. It is the most entrepreneurial college system in Latin America. Their mission is to graduate all students with an entrepreneurial mindset, with a humanistic outlook, which is the most fantastic mission statement I could possibly imagine. I'm only upset that I didn't think of that. But I've been to multiple campuses. We've trained hundreds of teachers in that system. What's implicit in the whole system, they took us on a bus to a children's home, to a children's hospital. And we toured the hospital and they got back on the bus. There's nothing said. It's implied. These are problems in our community that you guys are going to have to figure out how to solve.
And Gary, can you hear me, Gary?
Yeah.
Okay. So I got a text here that says that the most people are messaging panelists only. So I think we are the only one that are seeing the questions. So is there a way?
Okay. So if you click at the bottom, it says to all panelists and attendees. So Stephen said all panelists, but not attendees. I get it. Okay. So Stephen's response was a colleague of mine gave her college students $20 each at the beginning of January. I had to start a business as an individual or a group. They had 25 days to build and report results. Thank you, Stephen. My point for bringing up Tec de Monterrey is all incoming freshmen are given 1,000 pesos, which is about, I don't know what that is, $100. And they got 3 days or 4 days to turn it into something with no instructions whatsoever. They push them right in the pool right on day one.
So another thing that I want to add there, Stephen, is that to your question and to add what Gary's saying, also think about, and this can be done also very easily with some thoughts, right? I would also recommend giving students projects, a real life project or a business, and give them no resources. And one of the things that they have to do in that process is to find the resources themselves. Because in a lot of the case in entrepreneurship is about, working on a highly resource constrained environment, right? So you are, so you don't have the availability of a lot of things that we would like. And
that's how you develop an entrepreneurial mindset. You can't develop an entrepreneurial mindset if you have access to resources.
Right.
I mean,
so one of the things that I would recommend Yes, certainly, in that context, and that's what we are doing here. We are actually putting a program here in the springtime, this upcoming spring for students. We are actually giving them 1 week, and we are marketed for student teams. Any student can apply it, and they are not doing for any class purpose, by the way. This is all non-credit, so they have to be really interested, in that. So we are giving them a problem, and they have to solve that. We give them a 1 week, to find solutions to that. They work in teams. We bring them here, at the center, and they will make a list of what resources they need, and they have got to go and find it. And part of that, will be, going through that process, because that itself is an incredible, learning experience.
So thank you, Raja. Hangu Yoon is saying, I learned a lot about curiosity searching and opportunity searching process. I want to know more about how to incorporate curiosity into evaluation. Can you suggest more examples of how to do that? I'm teaching economics. I'd like to implement my evaluation process. My answer to that is I don't know, Hangu, but I would be very, very careful about that, because I think like that one can negate the other. I think you have to be very, very careful about that, because the inclusion of like outside authoritarian like sort of control can undermine curiosity. So I don't have the answers for you, but I would just say to be very, very careful about that. I would look at motivation theory to understand how extrinsic rewards undermine intrinsic motivation.
Yeah, and to add to Gary's sentiment there, if you are going to be incorporating a curiosity module into your classes, then I would strongly suggest to you to not base it on evaluation, or say that how are they going to be evaluated, or try to find that metric. Because at the end of the day, what you are trying to do is that you are just giving them a little bit about curiosity, but the whole notion of curiosity, that's a lifelong learning, right? It takes place. You just want them to continue down that path. So if you're going to be doing that, that kind of activity, then try to stay out of the evaluation part of the curiosity. Just, rather than evaluation, I would really, focus it on what do you want them to get out of it. And some of them will be successful, some of them won't be. That's the beauty about it, right? So, but if you really make it, based on some type of evaluation, then there might be a grade, or there might be something that is assigned to that, and I would get out of that. You want to create it in such a way that they either have an opportunity to succeed or fail, and the failure within the curiosity module, it's itself a learning process. So think about that in that terms.
I would agree with you, Raj. I think that what we fail to recognize is the extent to which extrinsic rewards, meaning letter grades, certificates, gold stars, dollars, whatever, undermine curiosity. They undermine the development of natural curiosity. I mean, students come to school, they're told by their parents, you need this piece of paper to get the job. I memorized the information long enough to get the test. I dumped the information. This is all well documented. It's so they're at a distinct disadvantage already, and I would agree with everything you're saying there, Raja. And I know that we're kind of running out of time here. I just want to wrap up. If there's any final questions, I'll be happy to answer them offline. I want to close by talking about the Entrepreneurial Learning Initiative, some of the work we are doing. You may have heard about the Ice House Entrepreneurship Program, the book and the course. It's designed to teach students how to think like an entrepreneur. You can buy the book. You can learn more about the curriculum. You can come to our facilitator training. The next one is in Cleveland. I know that's coming up very quickly. Following that, we have a facilitator training in Houston, Texas in February. But lastly, I just want to close by saying, if you'd like Raja and I to come to your university, your college, we would be happy to do that, to talk more about how to infuse entrepreneurial learning into the classroom across the curriculum. So my contact information is here. You can find me at gary@eliontrepreneur.com. And it's got EliMindset.com, sorry. And Raja, you can type in your email address there as well, and for all the panelists to see. We will follow up with you with the slide deck immediately following this webinar. You'll get an email with not only the slide deck, but the recorded version of this webinar. If you would like us to do a on-demand webinar for a group at your school to talk more about this, we can also make that happen. So again, thank you for joining us today. Thanks for spending some of your time with us. Would love your comments, love your contribution. Would love to hear more from you about how to create entrepreneurial learning across the curriculum. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Yes, Haiku, can I get slide and recording? Yes, we'll send those immediately following up. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for being on the call.